He wasn't supposed to survive. The words echoed through the empty streets as a lone figure emerged from the shadows, limping but determined. The night was cold, the wind biting at his face, but the Marine's focus was unwavering. Ethan Turner had seen his fair share of battles, but none of them had prepared him for this moment. His truck hummed softly as he drove down the deserted road, headlights cutting through the thick fog that had settled over the town. It was a quiet, eerie night, the kind that felt like the world was holding its breath. He hadn't been home for long, and the weight of the war still clung to him. He could still hear the echoes of gunfire in his mind, the memories of men he couldn't save. But tonight, something else would call for his attention. Up ahead, something caught his eye. A movement. Small, but unmistakable. A German shepherd. Its coat was matted, its ribs showing through its fur. The dog was running, struggling to keep up with the truck. Its breath came in ragged bursts, and its eyes were wide with desperation. Ethan's heart clenched as he slowed the truck, unsure of what he was seeing. The dog had no collar, no signs of a home. It was abandoned, lost, alone in the night. But it was also running after him. The Marine's instincts kicked in. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't just leave the dog there. He pulled over to the side of the road, his truck's tires crunching against the gravel. The dog, weak and trembling, came to a stop beside the truck, its head down as if it had given everything it had. Ethan opened the door, stepping out into the cold night air. His boots sank into the wet ground as he approached the dog. It didn't move. It only looked up at him with those amber eyes, full of fear and confusion. Ethan knelt down, reaching out a hand. The dog flinched at first, but then slowly, cautiously, stepped closer. He gently ran his fingers through the dog's fur, feeling the warmth of its body against the chill. "You're safe now," Ethan whispered, his voice low but comforting. He could feel the dog's heart beating fast under his hand. He could tell it was in pain, both physically and emotionally. But there was something else there, too. Something that made Ethan's chest tighten. This dog wasn't just seeking help. It was seeking a connection, a lifeline in a world that had abandoned it. Ethan didn't know what he was doing, but he knew he couldn't leave the dog to suffer. He opened the back of his truck and gently lifted the dog inside. It was exhausted, its eyes closing in relief. Ethan started the engine again, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. He didn't know where this would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. The truck's engine hummed steadily as Ethan made his way down the quiet road. The dog lay in the back, its body pressed against the cool metal, breathing in slow, shallow patterns. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the dog's tired eyes, now half closed, but still watching him with an expression that seemed to say, "Thank you." It wasn't a look he'd expected from an animal so broken. He wasn't a dog person. He hadn't had time for pets in his life, especially after his last tour. But this dog was different. Its loyalty was immediate, its trust almost instinctive. The rain began to fall, lightly at first, then harder, as if the skies themselves were mourning. The windshield wipers clicked rhythmically, clearing the view as Ethan turned onto a dirt road leading deeper into the woods. It wasn't far, just a few miles to the nearest veterinary clinic, but in the heavy silence of the truck, the minutes stretched on like hours. The dog stirred slightly in the back, its head lifting, ears twitching at the sound of Ethan's movements. Ethan pulled over to the side of the road, unsure if it was the right time, but instinct told him to stop. The dog sat up, still weak but alert. He grabbed the emergency blanket from the back seat and threw it over his shoulders, stepping out of the truck and into the downpour. The air was thick with the smell of wet pine and damp earth. He walked to the back, his boots sinking into the muddy soil with each step. The dog slowly climbed out, its legs shaky but determined. Ethan crouched down to meet the dog's gaze, and for a moment, the rain seemed to fade into the background. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said softly, brushing the wet hair from the dog's face. The dog's eyes, though tired, seemed to understand. It pressed its body against him, offering a gentle nudge. Ethan stood up, wiping the rain from his brow. The sight of this abandoned dog, so fragile yet filled with quiet strength, moved something deep inside him. He wasn't sure how he was going to make it through this, but he knew one thing. They both needed each other. Together, they walked toward the clinic, Ethan's heart heavy with the weight of the day. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion from his military service. It was the emotional toll that had started to crack open ever since he returned home. There was something about this dog's silent plea for help that echoed his own internal struggles. As they neared the clinic, the dog stopped. Its head turned to look back at Ethan with those amber eyes full of trust and gratitude. Ethan crouched again, meeting the dog's gaze. "We're almost there," he said. The dog wagged its tail faintly. As they stepped into the warmth of the clinic, the heavy rain continued to beat against the windows. The vet took one look at the dog and immediately sprang into action, assessing the dog's condition. Ethan watched silently from the corner of the room, feeling a strange sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. The dog had been abandoned, left to fend for itself, yet here it was, fighting for its life. And somehow, in that moment, so was he. The vet's office was quiet, the kind of stillness that only came with early mornings and emergency visits. Ethan sat in the corner, his hands clasped together as he stared at the dog on the table. The room smelled of antiseptic and old wood, but it was comforting in a way. The dog, now named Ranger, lay there, still trembling, but its breathing had steadied. The vet worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced precision as she checked Ranger's vitals. Ethan watched her every move, his mind racing. The rain outside was relentless, tapping against the clinic's windows like a drum, but it was a soft, soothing rhythm now. The dog's faint whimpers had faded, replaced by steady breaths, and for the first time since picking Ranger up, Ethan allowed himself to exhale. The vet turned to him after a few minutes, her eyes softening. "He's weak, but he'll pull through," she said, her voice calm, but filled with the professionalism of someone who had seen too many animals like this. A few days of rest, fluids, and he should be back on his feet. Ethan nodded, relief flooding through him. He had known that Ranger was a fighter, but hearing the vet's words made it feel real. He wasn't just a broken dog. He was a dog with a chance. Ethan leaned back in the chair, glancing at the dog, his chest tightening once more. He didn't know why, but something about Ranger's will to survive reminded him of his own struggles. The guilt, the loss, the battles that never seemed to end. It was almost as if this dog had been sent to him, a silent companion for the war he fought inside himself. The vet returned with a small bowl of water and placed it near Ranger's head. The dog stirred slightly, its amber eyes flicking toward the bowl before it slowly took a few tentative laps. Ethan stood up and walked over to the table, his eyes fixed on the dog. "You're stronger than I thought, huh?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ranger looked up at him, tail flicking weakly, as if acknowledging the compliment. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that he hadn't shared in a long time. In that moment, he realized that Ranger wasn't just another dog. He wasn't just a stray or an abandoned animal. He was a symbol of everything Ethan had lost, but also a reminder of what could still be saved. The vet finished her work, giving Ethan a few instructions on care and warning him to keep Ranger calm for the next few days. As Ethan paid the bill and prepared to leave, the weight of his own burdens seemed a little lighter. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a companion now, a loyal friend who had fought through the same darkness he had. Outside, the rain had started to slow, the clouds parting just enough for a sliver of sunlight to break through. Ethan opened the door, and as he stepped into the rain, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and that was all he needed. The days that followed were a blur of rain and recovery. Ethan kept Ranger close, his every step shadowed by the dog's watchful eyes. The dog's strength was slowly returning, its body healing as it rested by the warmth of the fire that Ethan had built in his small cabin. Every morning, Ethan would wake early, his hands stiff from the cold and long nights, but he always took a moment to check on Ranger, ensuring the dog was comfortable and warm. The bond between them grew with each passing day. Ranger would follow him everywhere, from the quiet mornings to the long drives that Ethan now took to clear his mind. It was during one of those drives that something shifted. They had driven far from the cabin, down winding roads lined with tall pines, their thick trunks whispering in the wind. The truck rumbled steadily as Ethan drove, his mind lost in thought. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, his head resting on the window, ears perked, watching the world pass by. Ethan didn't know what he was searching for. Maybe peace. Maybe a sense of belonging. The last few years of his life had been spent on autopilot, each day blending into the next. But in Ranger, he had found something different. The dog wasn't just a reminder of what he had lost. It was a symbol of something that could still be saved. They arrived at a small overlook, a quiet spot with a view of the valley below. Ethan parked the truck, killing the engine, and sat for a while, staring out at the endless expanse of trees and mountains. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling his lungs. He glanced over at Ranger, who had already jumped out of the truck and was standing on the edge, looking at the same view. Ethan smiled, the first real smile he had worn in months. "You know, I used to come here with my brother," he said softly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "We'd sit right here, watching the world go by. He used to tell me that no matter how bad things got, there was always something beautiful to see." Ranger looked back at him, his amber eyes soft with understanding, though the dog couldn't possibly comprehend the weight of Ethan's words. It didn't matter. Ranger was there, standing by him, always present, always patient. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was calming. As they sat there, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the landscape. Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He realized then that he had been searching for healing, for a way to put the past behind him. But it wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward, one step at a time, with Ranger by his side. The dog had saved him in a way no one else could. And in that quiet moment, as the last rays of the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Ethan knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Ranger, his loyal companion, by his side. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Ethan found a new layer of peace settling within him. Ranger had fully recovered, his energy returning, and his coat had become soft and shiny again, a testament to his resilience. Ethan spent more time with him, taking him on long walks through the woods, where the crisp air and the quiet of nature offered both of them the solitude they craved. There was a calmness in the routine they had established, a sense of belonging that Ethan had never known before. He would wake up early, the sun still low in the sky, and Ranger would be there, sitting by the door, waiting to start the day. They would head out into the fields, the dog's paws kicking up the morning dew, as Ethan's mind wandered to places it hadn't been in years. It was on one of these walks that Ethan had a moment of realization. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds calling, the wind rustling the leaves, and the distant cry of an owl. Ranger trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, ears alert to every sound. Ethan stood for a moment, taking in the scene around him, the way the light filtered through the trees, the way the world seemed to breathe with life. It was a peaceful moment, one he had been craving for so long. He had spent years running from his past, from the memories of war, from the pain of loss. But now, standing in the middle of the forest, he realized that the peace he had been searching for was right here. It wasn't in the future, it wasn't in some distant place. It was in the here and now. It was in the quiet companionship of a dog that had somehow found him when he needed it most. As Ranger returned to his side, Ethan crouched down and placed a hand on the dog's head. "You saved me. You know that?" he whispered, the words coming out almost as a confession. The dog looked up at him, his amber eyes warm and full of understanding. Ethan had never felt such an unspoken connection with another living being. Ranger had become more than just a dog. He was a symbol of the second chance Ethan had been given. Together, they had healed. Together, they had found their way out of the darkness. Ethan stood up, brushing the dirt off his pants, and looked around one last time at the forest, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over him. He wasn't the same man who had driven into town weeks ago. He wasn't the same man who had walked into that clinic with a broken heart and a sense of emptiness. He was different now, and he owed it all to the dog by his side. They turned back toward the cabin, Ranger trotting ahead, as if leading the way. The world around them was quiet, but to Ethan, it felt full of possibilities. He knew that whatever came next, he wouldn't be facing it alone. And for the first time in a long time, that thought brought him peace. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself settling into a life that, once upon a time, he had never imagined for himself. The days were simple now, filled with routine, but there was a peacefulness in the simplicity that he hadn't known he needed. Every morning, he would wake up to the sound of Ranger's paws on the floor, a soft thump that signaled the start of a new day. Together, they would go for their walks in the woods, the cool morning air filling their lungs as they explored the forest trails, side by side. The dog was always ahead, his nose to the ground, ears alert to every sound, but always turning back to check that Ethan was following. It was during one of these walks that Ethan's mind drifted back to the days of his service. He had spent so much of his life fighting battles that seemed to never end, chasing a sense of purpose that felt always out of reach. But here, with Ranger by his side, he realized that the war he had been fighting for so long wasn't just on the battlefield. It had been within himself all along. He had been fighting the loss, the guilt, the memories of his fallen comrades, and the weight of things he couldn't change. But now, in the quiet of the woods, those battles seemed smaller, less overwhelming. The peace he had found with Ranger wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the ability to move forward, despite the scars. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the golden light filtered through the trees, Ethan sat on a fallen log, watching Ranger chase after a stick he had thrown. The dog's joy was contagious, his excitement unbridled as he leaped through the air to catch it. Ethan smiled, a rare and genuine smile, his heart light. It was in moments like these that he felt the most alive, connected not just to the world around him, but to something deeper, something that had been buried for so long. He stood up, brushing the dirt from his pants, and walked over to Ranger, who was proudly holding the stick in his mouth, tail wagging. Ethan reached down to take the stick from the dog, and for a moment, they simply stood there, both of them content in each other's company. "You've brought me back to life, you know that," Ethan said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ranger looked up at him, his amber eyes bright with affection, as if he understood. Ethan had never been one for many words, but with Ranger, he didn't need to say much. The dog's loyalty spoke louder than anything he could express. As they made their way back to the cabin, the sun set behind them, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. It was a peaceful evening, the kind Ethan had almost forgotten existed. The world around him was still, but inside, there was a quiet stirring. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of it. With Ranger by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next, one step at a time. The air had started to warm as the days grew longer, and Ethan had found himself adjusting to a rhythm that felt right. The woods, the cabin, and Ranger, his loyal companion, had become everything. But as time passed, Ethan began to notice something he had been avoiding, the need to confront the past. It wasn't something that could be ignored forever. One evening, as he sat on the porch, the fading light casting long shadows over the trees, Ethan felt the familiar pang of loneliness creep into his chest. Ranger lay at his feet, but even the dog's comforting presence couldn't chase away the feeling that had followed him since his return from the war. The silence was too loud, too heavy. It had been months since he'd left the military behind, but the memories hadn't faded. They still lingered, haunting him in the quiet moments. He had convinced himself that he could leave it all behind, but he hadn't truly faced it yet. Ranger lifted his head, sensing Ethan's restlessness. The dog nudged his hand, as if reminding him that he wasn't alone. Ethan smiled, reaching down to scratch behind Ranger's ears, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He stood up, taking one last look at the peaceful surroundings. The world was still beautiful, but there was something in Ethan that needed more. He needed closure. He needed to reconcile the man he had been with the man he had become. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, Ethan grabbed his jacket and made the decision. It was time to return to the place where everything had changed. The drive felt longer than he remembered, the familiar roads now unfamiliar, as if the distance itself had become more daunting. Ranger sat quietly in the truck, his presence a steady comfort as they made their way back to the military base. The base was almost unrecognizable now, overgrown with ivy, its buildings worn down by time and abandonment. Ethan had left it behind so many months ago, and yet, walking through the gates again, it felt like no time had passed. Memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. The faces of his comrades, the sounds of drills, the weight of the uniform. He could still feel the pressure of it all. Ranger followed him as he walked through the old base, his steps slow but purposeful. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but something told him that he had to face it. As he reached the old barracks, the place where he had spent countless nights, Ethan stopped. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes settled on the worn door. The memories came rushing back. The laughter, the camaraderie, and the inevitable loss. He had once believed that leaving it all behind would give him peace, but now he realized that peace didn't come from running away. It came from confronting the past and making peace with it. He stepped forward, Ranger's paws padding softly beside him, and pushed open the door. Inside, everything was still. The room was empty, save for the echoes of what had been. He stood there for a long time, taking it all in. And for the first time since he had left, he felt a sense of calm. He wasn't the same man who had walked out of here months ago. He had changed, he had healed, and he had found something worth living for. With Ranger by his side, Ethan knew he was finally ready to move forward. He didn't need to forget the past, but he needed to accept it, and in doing so, he could find his place in the world again. As he turned to leave, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The journey was far from over, but with Ranger, he no longer feared what lay ahead. The return to the base had given Ethan the closure he needed, but the drive back to the cabin felt different. There was a new sense of calm in him, a quiet understanding that he had faced his past and could now move forward. Ranger sat beside him, the dog's head resting on the window, looking out at the passing landscape as if he too understood the journey they had just completed. The truck hummed steadily down the road, the familiar route back to their cabin now feeling like a place of sanctuary. The world outside seemed to be waking up, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden light over the fields. Ethan had found a rhythm to his days, a peace that had seemed impossible just months before. But as much as he had found healing, there was still more to be done. He knew that the true test wasn't about running away from the past, but about living fully in the present, with all the memories and scars that came with it. Ranger had been his constant companion, a reminder of loyalty, courage, and the quiet bond that could exist between a man and his dog. Ethan glanced over at the dog, who met his gaze with those warm, amber eyes, as if reading his thoughts. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, truly living, and appreciating every moment that came with it. The rest of the drive was peaceful, the silence between them comfortable. As they approached the cabin, the familiar sight of the trees surrounding it filled Ethan with a sense of contentment. They had come full circle. The cabin that had once felt like an escape now felt like home. He pulled into the driveway and parked the truck, the engine's hum slowly fading. Ranger jumped out before Ethan could even open the door, trotting excitedly toward the cabin as if it too recognized the significance of their return. Ethan followed at a slower pace, taking a deep breath as he stepped onto the porch. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and it filled his lungs like a promise of new beginnings. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting a soft, welcoming glow throughout the room. Ethan sat down in his favorite chair, the one by the window, and Ranger jumped up beside him, resting his head on Ethan's knee. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. There was no longer a sense of urgency, no feeling that he was running out of time. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. As he looked out the window at the setting sun, Ethan knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. But with Ranger by his side, he had everything he needed to face whatever came next. Together, they would continue this journey, one day at a time. The days grew longer as Ethan and Ranger settled into their routine. The cabin had become their sanctuary, a place of quiet reflection and peace. Ethan had found a sense of purpose in the simplicity of his life. Every morning, he would wake up to the soft sound of Ranger's paws on the floor, the dog's eager tail wagging as he waited for the day to begin. They would walk together through the woods, the cool morning air filling their lungs as they explored the trails. The world seemed to slow down around them, as if time itself had found a rhythm that matched their pace. Ethan's mind, once filled with the chaos of the past, now found a quiet comfort in the present. Ranger was always by his side, a loyal companion who seemed to understand him better than anyone else ever had. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. As the seasons changed, so did Ethan. The man who had once been lost, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, was now finding his way back to himself. He no longer felt the same heaviness in his heart. The guilt, the loss, the battles he had fought, though they would never completely fade, had started to feel less like burdens and more like parts of his journey. One afternoon, as the golden light of sunset bathed the cabin in a soft glow, Ethan sat on the porch with Ranger by his side. The dog's head rested on his knee, and Ethan absent-mindedly stroked the dog's fur, feeling the steady rhythm of its breathing. It was moments like these that made him realize how far he had come. The world around him was still, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind and the occasional bird call in the distance. He took a deep breath, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. The weight of the past seemed lighter now, almost like a distant memory. He had learned to live with it, to make peace with it. Ranger had taught him that. The dog, with all his loyalty and quiet strength, had shown Ethan what it meant to truly heal, to embrace the present without being weighed down by the past. As the days went by, Ethan found himself looking forward to the future for the first time in years. He didn't know what lay ahead, but with Ranger by his side, he was ready to face it. Together, they had come through the darkness, and now they were free to walk in the light. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. With every step they took, Ethan knew they were on the right path, one that would lead them to new adventures, new joys, and new lessons. And through it all, Ranger would be there, loyal and true, guiding him every step of the way. In this heartwarming tale of loyalty and redemption, an emotionally scarred Marine and a loyal German Shepherd form a bond that leads to healing and new beginnings. Through small but powerful moments, the Marine finds solace and purpose, showing the true power of companionship in overcoming trauma. As their journey unfolds, their connection serves as a reminder of the importance of love and trust, making this one of the most inspiring animal stories. With each passing day, the Marine and his dog grow stronger together, facing both the past and future with courage and mutual understanding. Their bond is a beautiful testament to the deep emotional connection that can exist between humans and animals, as they both seek peace and closure in their own ways. From the Marine's quiet reflection in the woods to his journey of confronting his past at the military base, this touching narrative is a perfect example of the kind of animal stories that leave a lasting impact on the heart. Their story not only celebrates their deepening bond, but also serves as an inspiring lesson in resilience and the healing power of animals, offering hope to anyone who has faced hardship or loss. The tale of the Marine and his dog is a prime example of the incredible bond between man and animal, and is a must-listen for anyone who enjoys powerful and emotional animal stories. As they both continue on their journey, they prove that healing is not just possible, but inevitable, as long as you have the right companion by your side. Character 1. A white male Marine in his 30s, with short, dark brown hair and a rugged, disciplined appearance. He's wearing a standard military field jacket, beige military t-shirt, and boots. The angle is front-facing, and the scene looks realistic, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration.